Hello, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to continue our discussion of the environmental impact of design and touch upon some of the basic concepts of sustainable design. So we'll be talking about the 4 Rs, systems thinking, the life cycle approach, the triple bottom line, you see an image here, and finish up by discussing the cost of environmental design. So let's start out with the 4 Rs. These might be familiar to you. One approach to describing sustainable design involves reduce, reuse, recycle. You might be familiar with those 3. And then a common 4th one to tack on is regenerate. You'll see various forms of these particular Rs. Here's another graphic: rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, refurbish, repair, repurpose, recycle. You can add on as many as you like. But how do they apply to green buildings and eco-design? Let's start with reduce. One important priority, in fact, is probably at the top of the list, is to reduce the operating energy required by buildings and to reduce the embodied energy required to build the new buildings. You also want to reuse. And in the building field, in this industry, that includes remodeling, renovating, any kind of adaptive reuse of existing buildings, right? That's the top priority in this category. You also can reuse building components. And that's a way to do this is called deconstruction, where you carefully take buildings apart instead of just knocking them down. Recycle is also important. You can use recycled building components. Some good examples of these are concrete, steel, and lumber. And also, your new building components can be made with recycled content. That 4th R we're going to tackle on the end there is all about restoring, renewing, and revitalizing the damaged earth. Right? And this is often done with more like landscaping and site projects. Let's move on to the concept of systems thinking. Your building components, everything in your building, is going to interact with each other, and they form systems. Some examples are a materials system, resources, energy, people system, information systems. All right. These systems are related to each other, and a decision made in one place can have ripple effects through the other systems. There's going to be trade-offs, and there's going to be synergies, and we'll talk a lot more about those as your semester goes along. All right. So it's important to understand that the individual elements of each system, all right, can have relationships to each other and will have an effect upon the whole. And that's systems thinking. So take that idea that your individual building components and individual design decisions have effect throughout a building as a whole, and extend that through time. And now we're talking about the life cycle approach. The life cycle approach is used as a method to guide and to help your decision-making process. As a designer, you have to make lots of decisions. And it looks at the entire life of a project, right, rather than a single snapshot or a moment in time. So as a designer using the life cycle approach, you would question and think about all phases of your project's life, from site selection through construction, not collection, and finally through demolition and even reuse. So here's an example from the LEED Core Concepts Guide it's not exactly an example about a building, but we've got an example of a particular industry. And it starts here in the middle. We're considering a particular product's entire life cycle. And it starts with sustainable forestry practice. So we're thinking about how our wood is grown. All right. And moving around this cycle, you would next think about transportation and the different energy used in the manufacturing process of this product. Looks like it's a paper. All right. After it's manufactured, it's transported again to a printer, transported again to a distributor, right, to a bookstore. And then the product is used, all right, but we got to keep thinking about it through the end of its life. And so the paper is recycled at the end of its life, and that waste stream is poured into a new product. New books are printed using 100% post-consumer waste. So let's move to the building industry, all right, now that we've had that other example, and think about the stages of a building's life cycle. You might start with materials acquisition. You're going to buy the materials that build your building, all right? Manufacturing, construction. Then your building is occupied and it's used, excuse me, and finally it's demolished. Right? These steps of a building's life cycle are called the cradle to grave approach. All right, and this particular one's an open loop system. All right, because you can see that in the beginning, materials are acquired, and the end they're demolished. This is not a continuous loop; it's an open loop. The cradle to grave life cycle approach is a good step towards sustainable design. But even further, if you want to take this idea even further, is the cradle to cradle approach. And this is a closed loop system. So take a look at our diagram here, and you can see that the waste outputs of each of these processes are recycled, reused, and they become inputs to other processes. Let's take a look at the illustration from your textbook. Go ahead and open up page 19 of a sustainable design. And you can see a little bit more complex diagram of the same system. Remember, cradle to grave, that would be an open loop system where materials are added in the beginning and removed at the end after demolition. Cradle to cradle is a closed loop system where all of the waste products of these different building life cycles are reused, recycled, and used again. So let's pull back to your textbook and read a quote here. It says, in the cradle to cradle life cycle of a product or building, all waste materials, including those resulting at the end of life, return to either biological or technical nutrient cycles. All right, that means they decompose or they're being recycled, or they're reincorporated into later steps in the life cycle. All right, you just learned about the 4 R's, systems thinking, and the life cycle approach to sustainable design. In the next video, we'll continue this discussion with some more of the basic concepts of sustainable design. Thanks, everyone.